Recently, I've been thinking about Leonard Hofstadter. Not the most memorable character from The Big Bang Theory. Not the most quotable, not the most eccentric. Leonard. And the strange thing about Leonard is that on paper, he shouldn't be that interesting. When The Big Bang Theory was at its most popular, when I used to watch it with friends, the focus of our discussion was always Sheldon, Howard, Amy, or even Stuart, but not Leonard. He's not the funniest character, he's not the strangest, he's not the smartest, and yet in many ways, Leonard might actually be the most important character in the entire show, because Leonard is doing something that the other characters aren't. So let me tell you why Leonard is a lot more, well, just a lot more than you might think. When you first watch the show, the characters around Leonard are almost exaggerated to the point of absurdity. Sheldon is a hyper-rational genius, incapable of understanding the mundane and the human, especially earlier on in the series. Howard is a different kind of extreme, with outrageous humour, stuck in a strange loop of immaturity and false overconfidence. Raj's extreme is awkwardness. He can't even speak to women until the end of season 6. And all of the other characters, even the more peripheral ones in the show, have an easily identifiable trait that is the driving force behind the comedy they contribute to the show. They are all pushed to comedic extremes.
He's trying to kill me, Leonard. Video games and rock music have desensitized him to violence.
Leonard, on the other hand, sits somewhere in the middle. He's clearly intelligent, he's a physicist, he has similar interests to the others, and he spends most of his time with other scientists. But unlike the others, Leonard still seems to understand the normal world. He understands sarcasm, he understands awkwardness, he understands when something is socially unacceptable. And because of that, Leonard becomes the translator between two worlds. When Sheldon behaves in a way that makes absolutely no sense to anyone else, Leonard is the one explaining it. And when something makes absolutely no sense to Sheldon, Leonard translates that too. He's nerdy enough to belong in that world, but normal enough that we can follow him there. Howard, Raj, and especially Sheldon are by far more interesting than Leonard, but without Leonard, there is little meaning to their eccentricity. Leonard acts as the entry point for the audience. He allows us to step into the show without feeling alienated. Leonard isn't just the audience's tour guide, he's also the centre of a lot of the emotional gravity in the show. The biggest laughs might come from the other characters, but the emotional stakes often belong to Leonard.
Mom smokes in the car. Jesus is okay with it, but we can't tell Dad.
He's the one dealing with rejection. He's the one apologising when things go wrong. He's the one who has to deal with all of Sheldon's abuse, and despite this, he's the one constantly taking care of him.
Sheldon's escaped and is terrorizing the village.
And that's not accidental, because if you look closely, Leonard seems to carry a kind of despair that the show rarely stops long enough to examine. And because it's a fast-paced comedy separated into 23-minute episodes, we never take the time to reflect on it. A lot of it traces back to his relationship with his mother, Beverly Hofstadter, who Christine Baranski does an incredible job of portraying. Some of my favourite episodes are the ones with her in.
I had a wonderful childhood. Tell me about it.
Leonard didn't grow up in a house where affection was freely given. His mother is a brilliant psychologist who approaches parenting like a research project. His childhood stories often sound less like memories and more like case studies. Compliments are rare, approval is rare, warmth is non-existent.
And I built 2 radio-controlled arms that would hug me and pat my back.
And when a child grows up in an environment like that, something subtle but lasting happens. They learn that love is something that must be earned. If you zoom out and look at the entire structure of The Big Bang Theory, something interesting appears. Underneath all the science and comic book references, the central storyline of the early show is actually very simple. Leonard wants to be with Penny, something neither he nor his friends think is actually possible. That's the engine that drives the first few seasons. The very first episode begins with Leonard meeting Penny for the first time. Immediately, he's fascinated by her. She represents something that feels slightly out of reach. Confidence, classical beauty, social ease. A world that Leonard was never quite invited into. And over the next few seasons, the show circles the same question. Will Leonard actually get the girl? Spoiler alert, eventually they date. And then they break up, and then they date again. And underneath all of that is Leonard's quiet fear that Penny might one day realise she could do better. Which, in some ways, is the fear Leonard seems to carry about almost everything. That people will realise he's not quite enough. But, final spoiler, eventually, after years of build-up, Leonard and Penny get married. And that moment feels like the natural end point of the story. In my opinion, this is where the series starts to decline, because the original quest, the shy scientist hoping he might somehow end up with the girl next door, has finally been resolved. Everything after that kind of feels like an epilogue to me.
Sometimes I forget how smart you are.
Leonard is an incredibly accomplished person, although he doesn't necessarily feel it. He's a respected scientist, he works at a major university, he's surrounded by brilliant people, but emotionally, he's deeply insecure. Because when you grow up feeling like approval is conditional, you never quite stop trying to prove yourself, even when you've already succeeded. So Leonard is constantly performing small acts of validation seeking, apologizing when he doesn't need to, trying to be liked, trying to keep everybody happy, trying to make sure the fragile ecosystem of his friendships doesn't collapse. Because somewhere deep down, Leonard seems to believe that if he stops trying, he might lose everything. I get the feeling that so many people I know relate to him and feel his pain. And I think the thing that makes The Big Bang Theory so addictive is going through this pain with Leonard and getting through it with comedy. And this might be the most powerful thing about Leonard as a character. He isn't extraordinary in the way the other characters are. He isn't the smartest, he isn't the boldest, he isn't the funniest. He's just good. He's kind, he's patient, he tries to do the right thing even when he messes it up. And in a world full of exaggerated personalities, Leonard represents something more ordinary, but also something more honest. He represents the uncomfortable truth that most of us aren't prodigies or geniuses or larger-than-life personalities.
What you doing?
I'm attempting to view my work as a fleeting peripheral image so as to engage the superior colliculus of my brain.
Most of us are just people trying our best to be ourselves, while quietly wondering if that will ever be enough. And somehow, by the end of the show, Leonard gets an answer to that question, because Penny chooses him. Not the most confident man, not the most impressive, just the man who kept showing up. There's also a bigger cultural reason Leonard works as a character. When The Big Bang Theory premiered in 2007, nerd culture was still treated like a niche. Comic books were for children, or enthusiasts. Scientists were rarely the center of any story. But over the next decade, something changed. Superhero movies became some of the biggest in the world. Tech culture started shaping the economy. Being a nerd slowly became normal, even cool.
What are you waiting for? Let's bounce, bitches!
And Leonard sits right in the middle of that shift as he develops throughout the show. At its peak, The Big Bang Theory was the most watched scripted television show in the United States, and one of the most watched shows in the world at the time. And so, it's not a stretch to say the world could be quite different because of The Big Bang, especially when you consider the butterfly effect. I can't help but wonder how the world might be different without Leonard in it. I never realized it, but looking back to my teenage years, Leonard was something like a role model for me, or at least something that I could relate to. So certainly, my life would be different without him.
Oh, hi.
So maybe Leonard Hofstadter isn't the funniest character in The Big Bang Theory, and he is probably the most boring, but he's the character the entire show quietly revolves around. He's the bridge between the audience and the world of the show. He's the emotional center of the group. He's the insecure overachiever who never quite feels like he belongs. And in the end, he's the guy who just wants a simple life in a slightly absurd world, which might be why so many people recognize a little bit of themselves in him. Because Leonard's story isn't really about experimental physics, or comic books, or even Penny. It's about something much simpler. It's the struggle we all go through, the balance between being a good person and not being a pushover, between wanting to be accepted and wanting to be ourselves, between accepting our repetitive reality and allowing ourselves to dream of something more. I know it might feel strange to talk about a character from a show that ended in 2019, but it's the kind of thing this channel is going to look at. In a way, my videos are going to be very random, so if you like this video, subscribe and give it a thumbs up. It might just help it get off the ground. And I'd be very interested in knowing who was your favourite character from The Big Bang Theory.